Welcome to Cause Before Symptom, uncovering the real cabal and spiritual forces that are controlling the world. And now, here is your host, James Carner.
Welcome to Cause Before Symptom. I'm your host, James Carner. Today is December 4th, 2025, and tonight's episode is all about the fallen flesh. We found out some interesting information going through the Ethiopian canon, and we're going to be talking about why the Watchers' bodies were first forbidden technology. I'm going to spill the beans on what it is. They spoke their spiritual bodies into existence in flesh. They had that power and capability. So this is going to be an exciting night to expose the truth, because for a long time, I haven't been able to figure out how the sons of God, the Watchers, the fallen angels, were able to do it, boink with humans, with the fair-looking women of Earth. And, well, it turns out that before the fall, they had the means to turn themselves into flesh. And then they lost that power. Shout out to everybody on the live chat Rumble. Number one warrior is Royal Rumble saying, "What's up, Pastor? What's up, warriors? God bless each and every single one of us. Amen. Bless us all." Number two warrior is Boots Hafner. Boots stating, "Hello, Pastor James Carner of the Rumble Airwaves and creator of Elite Potion." All right. Hello, fellow warriors and new listeners. Welcome. And if you're enjoying this topic, please hit the thumbs up button. That would help me out a lot. Please hit the thumbs up button or like if you like this show. Otherwise, Rumble doesn't give a crap about how many subscribers I have, even though I have over 2.5 thousand. Number three warrior is Scorpion saying, "Hey, y'all. Hope everyone is having a blessed day." And number four warrior is Surfer Wife saying, "Hello, hello, hello." And Surfer Wife said, "I wondered that too." All right, guys, let's get into Shitty Breaking News.
Welcome to Shitty Breaking News with your host, James Carner, offering his shitty opinion.
Well, it is. Second strike scrutiny obscures larger question about Trump's boat attacks. Who cares? We're there for oil. We're not there for drugs. So don't go there. What's Congress going to do? We've been going to war without Congress since, I don't know, World War I? World War II? No, since after World War II, we've been going to war without Congress, right? Did Bush Sr. get any approval to go into Iraq and destroy the living shit out of it and then rebuild with his buddy Dick Cheney with Halliburton? No, they just went in and did it. And what did Congress do? They wrote shitty shit like this: "Second strike scrutiny obscures larger question about Trump's boat attacks." There's nothing Congress can do. Executive orders have the power, and unless you, stop these executive orders from happening, meaning don't let the president sign away off of anything other than the bills and other shit that have to go through Congress and Senate, then eventually the president's desk. But yeah, dude, come on. Anybody who becomes president gets to be the king of the world, right? We have executive orders, and dude, don't think that Trump's for you, dude. He's a Freemason. In fact, Urban sent me a little text saying, "Hey, check it out. Trump admits he's a Mason." And he did. He clearly is like, "I'm a Mason." So don't believe him, dude. He's a Satanist. He worships the devil, thinks he's going to live forever. And they're all conned. And they have no idea because they're under a spirit of delusion. And they're not going to get what they really want. And I guess they're getting their rewards here on Earth. Fine, let them get their rewards on Earth, but definitely not in the second life. Supreme Court hands Trump a victory in fight over Texas congressional map. Well, it looks like the Republicans can go ahead and switch up and make it even more impossible for Democrats to get any way of, gaining any power in Texas because they're doing that the shenanigans of, moving little sections and territories of places, gerrymandering. And it should be all illegal, but they find some trick to get around it, and really it's all a show. So who gives a shit? Grand jury rejects Department of Justice to attempt to revive the fraud case against Attorney General Letitia James. Yeah, I had to click on the link. It said Letitia James. Who gives a shit? Come on, man. No one's going to jail. Nobody gets in trouble, left or right, as they're both working, both working together. They're all buddies, all right, left and the right. Now, PBS says, what led the FBI to a man accused of placing pipe bombs in D.C.? Oh, my God. What led them to it? Well, my question is, if you've got all of this surveillance shit going on, you've got enough technology that you're spying on us, when someone even thinks about it. So why not grab the guy before he drops off the pipe bombs, which, by the way, pipe bombs are nothing more than just hand grenades. A couple hand grenades in DC, whoopity-doo. That ain't gonna do dick. So I have no idea why we would even print something like this. Obviously, the FBI needs some way of basically, making themselves look like they're needed again. Well, they're not needed. They never have been. It's just a way of spying on the American people. Screw that. And from Mogadishu to Minneapolis, Somalis reject Trump's bigoted remarks. He's a bigot. We're going to take over this country. Well, hey, wouldn't be the first time. This happens all over the world for us to be shocked. Oh my God, shocked that some other country puts in their person as mayor and then starts to change the state towards their goals. I mean, come on. Stuff happens all the time worldwide, and we're shocked it's happening in America. America, who gives a shit? It doesn't matter. If you're Christian, just be happy with what you got. Be happy that you're alive. Be happy you got breath in your lungs, which is the spark of God. And quit worrying about all this crap. Left, right, this, that. None of that matters, all right? We should be happy, joyous, free. That's what the Bible says anyway. But yeah, we're all addicted to drama, so I guess that's out of the picture. And Congo and Rwanda apparently sign a symbolic peace deal in Washington as their fighting rages on. Why would you go to Washington, D.C. to sign a peace deal between two countries on the continent of Africa? They're their own thing. They could do whatever they want, right? I just don't get it. Why Washington? Well, it's because we control them, apparently. Isn't that what it says behind the lines? Isn't that what it's saying right behind the scenes? I mean, what do I know? Excuse me. I'm just a hick from Oregon, and that is breaking news. All right, well, when we come back, we're going to talk about the fallen flesh, why the Watchers' bodies were the first forbidden technology. Yep, we found the information, and I'm excited to show it to you.
Paying federal income tax is voluntary. So why has every person you know done it their entire lives? You were told it's the law, but the system was built on a lie hidden in plain sight, that you are required by law to pay. The truth is, 98% of Americans don't owe income tax by law. Federal income tax is for federal employees. For everyone else, it's voluntary. You agreed to pay when you signed your first tax return, and you've been renewing that contract every year since. Sounds too good to be true? You're asking, why doesn't everyone know this? Because almost everyone signed before they were old enough to understand it. It's time to unlearn the lie and break free from IRS jurisdictions, protect your assets, and keep more of what you earn legally. Visit unincorporatedisassociations.com now and become tax-free.
Hey, that's how they all set it up, all the billionaires, millionaires. I know you. I'm telling you, a lot of people are absolutely terrified of going towards an unincorporated association because they think it's illegal. Well, it's not. This is how people finally make money through these, and it's not even a loophole. It's true. They've just been deceptive enough to tell you that federal income tax means you have to pay taxes on your income, but you're not a federal employee. And so there's enough lawyers that back that up. And, if you're not going in this direction, I don't understand what you're so afraid of. When you sign to the Internal Revenue Service that you're going to pay them money, then you're screwed. There's nothing you can do because you signed it. Get out of Babylon, guys. This is the only way I can think of, right? Becoming a sovereign, I think I've proven my point. It's great on paper, but you're up against the beast system, and you better have the wits. And if you don't, you better have someone who understands this sovereign information in both maritime and land laws. And if you don't have any of that, you just go up there trying, with your AI, trying to argue with the mafia. You're out of your mind, dude. All right, let's get into the fallen flesh. Why the Watchers' bodies were first forbidden technology. So there's a truth out there older than any cathedral, every mystery school, every occult archive, and every buried tablet of Sumer. And that is this. The first forbidden technology was not metal nor sorcery. It wasn't even weapons or machines, not even hybrids, but the actual bodies of the Watchers themselves. And thanks to the Ethiopian Bible, we're able to figure this stuff out. And before there were pyramids, before there were kings, before the flood swallowed the world, there was a moment when the sons of heaven crossed a line that no creature had ever crossed. They did not bring tools, they brought themselves. And they descended in bodies that were never meant to stand on the dust of the earth. Bodies that were shaped in the brightness of heaven and then densified into something the women of men could touch, behold, and bear children from. So apparently the sons of God had jizz, had no idea. Now their very embodiment was the transgression, and every corruption that followed, from sorcery to metallurgy, from glamour to warcraft, was merely the fallout of heaven's rebellion clothed in flesh. Now the West has forgotten this. Rome completely erased it. And seminaries, well, they buried it, but the Ethiopian canon preserved it. And Enoch shouted it into the ages. The Watchers had bodies before the flood, real, physical, reproductive bodies, and that simple fact explains every mystery people have been chasing for thousands of years. Now, the pre-flood world was not advanced because humans were geniuses. It was advanced because immortal beings with transmutable flesh stepped into the world and infected it with knowledge not meant for mortals. And their bodies were the interface. Their flesh was the gateway. And their presence alone accelerated corruption, altered bloodlines, and destabilized creation. What the modern world calls ancient technology, well, is simply what happens when beings from a higher order violate the boundaries God set for them. And this is the part that must be understood. The Watchers did not put on biological suits the way a man puts on armor. They became flesh in order to sin in flesh. Their bodies were not manufactured. Their bodies were the direct misuse of a heavenly capability, the ability to densify spirit into matter. And this is why God judged them in the very form they chose. You see, you cannot bind an essence with chains. You cannot bury a spirit under sharp stones. Only beings with bodies can be imprisoned underground. The Ethiopian canon is unapologetically clear about this. The Watchers were bound hand and foot because they had hands and feet. And their embodiment was both the crime and the evidence. So in a way, you could call them demigods. Half mortal, half living forever. Fallen angel. And this is quite interesting. This is where the modern mind actually stumbles, because we imagine everything through the lens of machines and engineering. So when we hear the fallen, altered humans, we picture laboratories and tools. At least I did. But the oldest record tells a very different story. And thank God for the Ethiopian canon. It's answering every one of the hardest questions I've ever had. The Watchers did not need machines. Their bodies were machines of another order, heavenly constructs able to interface with genetics, physicality, reproduction, and the sensory world. They could see as angels could see, and yet touch as men touch. Well, no wonder why they looked down at the earthly women and saw that they were fair, right? Because they were hotter, they were gorgeous. And they're fair enough. We can do this. Well, that makes sense to me. So they could see as angels see and touch as men touch. And they could teach as spirits teach, and yet corrupt as embodied beings corrupt, and be completely worshipped hand and foot by man, because they simply are supermen, superwomen, you know? And they represented a hybrid existence that never was authorized by God. But they did it anyway because they spoke it into existence. Now, their bodies were a violation of cosmic law. And this is why their offspring, the giants, were abominations. They were not the product of technology. They were the product of misaligned natures, of heaven mating with earth. No lab on earth could produce what the Watchers produced because the corruption was not a chemical. It was ontological. It was a mixing of kind, a sin so destructive that it filled the whole world with violence. And it happened because beings who were not human entered the human domain in bodies capable of generating life. After the flood, God shut that door forever. The Watchers were imprisoned, 90% of them. That's what the Ethiopian Bible says, 90%. Satan begged for just 10% to keep them. And the boundaries of creation were sealed, and the kind of cross-realm corruption that once existed was permanently removed from the earth. This is why nothing happened, or this is why nothing happening today, no technology, no vaccine, no gene experiment, can recreate Genesis 6. Humans lost the power to cross heaven's boundary, and angels lost the right to cross ours. The bodies of the Watchers were the first forbidden technology, and they were taken out of circulation by divine judgment. So everything the modern world is attempting to do, genetic edits, transhumanist upgrades, synthetic biology, artificial resurrections, is nothing more than a cheap counterfeit of what the Watchers once did through embodiment. They are not returning. Their bodies are sealed in darkness. The age of angelic flesh transgressing human boundaries is over. But the elites, the occultists, and the technocrats still chase the echo. They want the power the Watchers once wielded. They want to reopen the door God shut. They want to reclaim the forbidden technology of heavenly embodiment. And that is why this show matters. Because we are in the age when the world is trying to rebuild. Rebuild the flesh of the fallen without understanding what it was. They are trying to recreate a sin that God will never allow to be repeated. And this is the mystery of pre-flood embodiment, the sealed genome, and why modern attempts to or at corruption will only ever be symbolic shadows, not true Nephilim rebirth. Now, before the world drowned, before Noah ever lifted a tool, to build the ark, there was a breach so profound that it changed the fabric of creation itself. And it began the moment the watchers stepped out of their appointed realm and took on bodies that granted them by birth. Not granted to them by birth, but seized by rebellion. An idea. They got together and said, if we're going to commit this sin, we all go down together. I ain't taking the fall. And the ancient texts are firm on this point. The sons of heaven did not project illusions. They did not appear as phantoms or shadows. They descended in flesh. They clothed themselves in substance, and they entered into the density of the earth with limbs, sinews, eyes, and reproductive capability. And this was not an accident of nature. It was a deliberate rebellion against the order of God. Now, the Ethiopian canon preserves this truth without hesitation. The watchers became flesh. This single phrase collapses thousands of years of watered-down theology, or what the King James Bible says. They crossed a line forbidden since the dawn of Eden, abandoning their own habitation and taking on bodies designed for interaction with human women. Ow, ow, ow. In doing so, they weaponized their form. Their very presence distorted what God had separated. Flesh was never meant to be a technological interface. Yet in their rebellion, it became precisely that. Their bodies acted as the conduit between the spiritual and the biological, enabling a fusion of realms that God had intentionally divided when he created the heavens and the earth. And this is why the corruption of Genesis 6 is unlike anything in human history. The Watchers did not use tools to alter humanity. They used themselves. Their bodies were not passive vessels. They were active instruments of corruption, hyper-responsive to will, and capable of interfacing with matter at a level humans could barely understand. And they stepped into the world like living engines of transgression. Their flesh carried the brilliance of heaven mixed with the defiance of rebellion. And it was this hybrid embodiment, spirit densified into matter, that allowed them to reproduce with human women and generate beings whose nature was incompatible with creation itself, which would explain the crazy, huge 40 feet to 100 feet giants that came out. Believe me, if you were an earthly woman, you made love to one of these fallen angels, and when you had to pop one of those babies out, I feel bad for you. The giants were proof of this violation, according to the Ethiopian canon. And they did not emerge through gradual evolution. They did not arise from mutation or environmental pressure. They were the unnatural offspring of heavenly beings misusing a form they were never meant to yield. Their size, their appetites, their violence, and their destruction of the earth all testify to the catastrophic consequences of the Watchers' embodiment. And the world became filled with violence, not because humanity suddenly became evil, but because heaven's corruption was walking the earth in bodies that it stole. And this is where the modern minds fail to grasp the ancient reality. We project backwards our obsession with machines and technology. We imagine the Watchers in laboratories forging genetic edits with tools. But the ancients tell a different story. Their bodies were the mechanism of corruption. Their limbs were the instruments. Their breath carried forbidden knowledge. They spoke it. And their form allowed them to transmit arts and sciences not meant for mortals. And their embodiment itself was the advanced technology beyond silicon, beyond metal, beyond anything contemporary humans can replicate. And the Watcher's flesh was the first device capable of altering the world at scale. And when they stepped into form, they brought with them the knowledge of heaven, but without the restraint of obedience. Everything that they taught, warfare, enchantment, cosmetics, metallurgy, astrology, all came through the bridge of their embodied presence. They were so smart because they knew more than just what man did, because they were from a completely different dimension. And they were beings that interfaced with beings, or they were being interfaced with beings whose the very nature destabilized their lineage. So the offspring were not children, they were consequences. And when God judged the earth, he judged that embodiment directly, binding the Watchers in the very bodies they chose, because the body was the instrument of their sin. Now, this is the truth forgotten by the West, but preserved by Ethiopia. The Watchers had bodies before the flood, and those bodies were the first forbidden technology. Every corruption of man, every fallen dynasty, every secret civilization, every lost mystery school traces its roots back to that moment when heaven invaded earth through flesh. And until we understand that embodiment, we misunderstand the war we are living in right now. Now, the judgment of the Watchers makes no sense unless their embodiment was real. Every line in Enoch, Jubilees, and the Ethiopian canon points to this single uncomfortable truth. God did not judge them as disembodied spirits. He judged them in the form they stole. And the heavenly court did not reach down into the ether for souls drifting between dimensions. The decree was aimed squarely at beings who stood on the earth, who taught with tongues, who stretched out hands, who took women by force. Can't even get your own chick, you pussy. And who reproduced children in violation of the created order. Flesh was the arena of their sin, and flesh became the arena of their imprisonment. So the text says that they were bound hand and foot. And this is not symbolic. You cannot bind a metaphor. You cannot shackle a vision. The chains of darkness were fastened to bodies because the transgression took place through bodies. And when God commanded the archangels to cover their faces with rough stones until the day of judgment, this wasn't poetic. It was a physical sentencing carried out upon physical beings. The Watchers had chosen embodiment as their weapon, and God made embodiment their prison. Now, this explains why their corruption was so catastrophic. They had abandoned their estate, their dimension, their mode of existence, and they did not just simply fall, they descended. They did not merely rebel. They entered creation in a way that destabilized everything around them, and it made a horrible mess as their children ate everything in sight, including people. The world that Noah inherited was not merely sinful, it was warped. The earth groaned because it was bearing the weight of beings whose presence stretched nature beyond what it was designed to hold. So this is why the flood had to be physical. A spiritual judgment, like the one that would later bind Satan for a season, would not have cleansed the corruption of embodiment. The Watchers birthed the creatures who were not meant to exist, and their offspring walked, devoured, conquered, and filled the mountains and valleys with violence. The land was contaminated by the existence of their bodies and the bodies of their sons. Yeah, they procreated. Only a flood could erase what had been written into the soil by the feet of giants. But the most profound detail is this. After the flood, the ability for heavenly beings to assume bodies was removed. The watchers were locked away. Their offense was sealed. Their power to densify into matter was revoked. That door closed, and humanity has lived ever since in a world where angels do not take wives, do not walk openly, do not reproduce, and do not manifest in physical form. The very capacity that made Genesis 6 possible was stripped out of creation. And this is where the entire timeline divides. Before the flood, embodiment was a possibility. After the flood, embodiment became a forbidden relic, locked behind judgment. This means the corruption of that era cannot return in the same form. The hybrids of the ancient world cannot reappear through angelic reproduction. The bodies of heaven can no longer cross into the realm of flesh. And because of this, all modern attempts to recreate the pre-flood violation fall short. So this is the real reason why transhumanists, occultists, and global technocrats are obsessed with hybridization. They sense something was lost, so they are trying to reopen a path that God sealed. And they are reaching for the power the Watchers once wielded, not realizing that heaven itself removed that capability forever. And when you understand that the Watchers were judged in the form they chose, well, everything else begins to make sense. The flood was not merely judgment, it was a reset of what embodiment even meant. And from that moment on, every attempt to alter human nature, whether through sorcery, ritual, or technology, has been a counterfeit of a power that no longer exists, a memory of a sin that heaven buried under the waters. And when the Watchers took on flesh, they did more than just corrupt bloodlines. They altered the trajectory of civilization itself. The world before the flood was not advanced because humans evolved rapidly, nor because some forgotten nation discovered technologies ahead of its time. The pre-flood world accelerated because beings from another realm stepped into human history carrying knowledge that did not originate on earth. And their bodies became the bridge between heaven's wisdom and earth's vulnerability. And in that fusion, the world became something God never intended it to be. Every ancient culture remembers this age as a golden time of impossible feats. Megalithic stones that modern cranes cannot lift. Star maps more accurate than our own telescopes. Metallurgy purer than contemporary labs can reproduce. And a level of coordination and violence that seems impossible for early humanity. How can we explain all this? Well, giants who were born from flesh angels with knowledge beyond our capabilities starts to add up. So these memories are not fantasy. They are the residue of a world shaped by beings who should never have walked among men. And the Watchers taught humanity arts that were meant for celestial beings and not for mortals. And they introduced weapons that carried the principles of heaven's war into earthly conflict. They unveiled enchantments that manipulated the natural order, and they taught women how to alter appearance, and men how to extract ore, kings how to read the sky as a clock, and they collapsed distinctions between the earthly and divine in ways that destabilized every boundary God had established. This is why humanity's fall in that era was so swift. The Watchers did not merely share information, they accelerated desire. When beings with greater intellect, greater presence, and greater charisma embodied themselves, humanity became intoxicated. The allure of forbidden knowledge, the seduction of angelic form, they must be hot. Well, the power of hybrid offspring, all of it functioned like a spiritual contagion. And civilization surged forward, but not in wisdom. It grew in violence, appetite, and corruption. What modern minds would call advancement was, in truth, the rapid expansion of sin, fueled by unnatural beings wearing bodies they desecrated by choice. Surfer Wife asks me, so what does it mean when Jesus returns will be just like in the days of Noah mean? Knowledge will increase. And that knowledge did increase. And the Nephilim, they are going to return. In what form, I have no idea. I do believe that transhumanism, if they cannot enter into a body, the angelic, if they're not allowed to enter into a body, then they have to enter into something, and that something most probably is going to be technology, ones and zeros, quantum computations that can pull information from another realm. And even that, they're not going to be able to enjoy the full taste of human flesh. So days of Noah, instead of it being giants that would be wrecking havoc, it would be robots. And these robots are going to be the next desire of humans because we're going to want to have sex with them. Serious. We're gonna. Ouch. The giants who followed were the ultimate symbol of this collapse. Their very existence disrupted agriculture, economy, governance, and peace. They devoured resources, like a lot, dominated cities and ruled tribes with brute force, and they became the kings of the pre-flood world. And their rule was built upon the bodies of their fathers, the transgressing watchers. And when Enoch said the earth cried out because of them, he was not using metaphor. The presence of these hybrids damaged creation itself. They were anomalies that were breaking every law of proportion, balance, and kind. Do you not think that robots could do that? Robots with the angelic spirit that's able to inhabit somehow, you could say possess these robots. See, if they can't get in through the flesh, they're going to get in through something else. And yet, astonishingly, the world worshipped them. That's not really astonishing. If you couldn't kill them because they're just so big. I mean, just look at the movies, and how even in the movies, mankind were worshiping those demigods. So to me, it's not just astonishing, but more like a force worship. Yeah. Now, the early humans saw the giants as demigods, not abominations. They built monuments for them, and they recorded their deeds, and they submitted to their rule. And this is why ancient structures appear oversized for human use. Well, they were not built for men. They were built for those who towered over men. And when archaeological remnants of the pre-flood civilization surface, they bear exactly the traits you would expect from a world reshaped by heavenly rebels interacting through bodies that did not belong in this realm. This is the truth behind or beneath every myth of lost civilizations: Atlantis, Lemuria, Zeptepi, the antediluvian kings of Mesopotamia, the primeval dynasties of Egypt. All of them trace their origins to the same disruption. Heavenly beings entered bodily form and imparting knowledge humanity was never meant to carry. It was not technology that advanced humanity. It was interference. It was embodiment. It was the Watchers. Another thing to consider is that we don't know how long these Nephilim beings would last. Can they last 1,000 years, 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 years? Are these the beings that they're finding in caves that have red hair and they just can't simply destroy, and they live in caves because, well, they're just not wanted in this world? I don't know. And it also talks about the Bible, the Bible, it talks about Nephilim being in the earth after the flood. So there's lots of questions we have, and we're learning as we go. Royal Rumble says, look at my comment about that earlier. It's not just a crazy theory that they want AI sex robots to lay with man. Give it 30 years, it will be laws protecting those rights. Yeah. But man can't inseminate a robot. So who knows? But we're getting closer to the truth than we ever have before, thanks to the Ethiopian canon. And you can go download a real transcription of the Ge'ez into English on my website, jamescarner.com. Now, when God judged that world, the Nephilim world, he did not merely remove the giants, he removed the foundation that made their existence possible. And when the bodies of the watchers were imprisoned, the era of forbidden advancement ended. Civilization reset at a pace consistent with human nature. The brilliance of pre-flood structure becomes a myth because their architects were locked away and their hybrid offspring destroyed. So the world we live in now is a world without the bodies of the watchers. And understanding that difference is the key to understanding why the modern age is not a return of Genesis 6, but a counterfeit of it. And when the waters receded, the world entered a silence it had never known, a silence created by absence. The bodies that once walked the earth in defiance of heaven were gone. The giants who devoured the land were gone. These celestial hybrids who taught forbidden arts were gone. And the sons of God who had densified themselves into flesh were sealed beneath rough stones in chains and darkness, never again permitted to cross the boundary between realms. They were locked up until the day of judgment. And what remained was a world stripped back of its human pace, its human limitations, and its human vulnerabilities. So this is why the early post-flood civilizations look nothing like the world that came before it. Their buildings are smaller, their techniques are simpler, their myths more distant. The monuments of the New Age were not carved by beings who stood 12, 15, or 20 feet tall. They were built by men returning to the slow work of rebuilding society without the interference of heavenly rebels. So knowledge no longer came from beings of light dressed in flesh. It came from the struggle of survival, the rediscovery of skills, and the quiet guidance of the righteous remnant. And what changed was not merely infrastructure, it was the structure of the world itself. The invisible door that allowed angels to put on flesh was shut, and the rules of embodiment were rewritten, and heaven closed access to the biological plane. No being from above could ever take on a material form capable of reproduction. And the pre-flood corruption was not just judged, it was prevented from ever happening again. And because of this, humanity's relationship with the divine shifted. Encounters with angels after the flood were visions, appearances, flashes, and moments, not incarnate beings living among men. And this is why every post-flood angelic encounter in Scripture is brief, symbolic, or even constrained. Angels appear, deliver a message, and then depart. They do not take wives. They do not build cities. They do not establish dynasties, and they do not teach metallurgy or enchantments. They do not father giants, and their contact with the human world is regulated by heaven and constrained by covenant. So a few of them, yes, ate with Abraham and his wife. But they did not, after they left, go take on wives and start a family. Even Satan, once capable of entering Eden's garden, is embodied form, becomes limited to influence, deception, and spiritual provocation, not physical creation. So this sudden shift explains the dramatic contrast between the antediluvian and post-diluvian eras. Before the flood, humanity was exposed to the brilliance of beings who had no business walking among mortals. And after the flood, humanity was left to its own devices, its own labor, its own slow climb toward knowledge and governance. And the advancements that once came from heavenly interference disappeared, leaving only legends, fragments, and degraded memories. And this is why early civilization seemed obsessed with sky gods, watchers, giants, serpent beings, and fallen stars. Well, they were not imagining myths, they were remembering a world that vanished overnight. But in the silence after the flood, something else emerged, something new, something the watchers had never anticipated. God began to shape a people who would relate to him, not through overwhelming displays of power or the allure of forbidden knowledge, but through covenant, obedience, and faith. The flood ended the age of corruption and corrupted flesh so that the world could become the stage for a different kind of miracle, the incarnation of the Son. And when God himself would one day take on flesh, it would be a holy embodiment, not a rebellious one. And the watchers had seized bodies to corrupt. Christ would take a body to redeem. So once you see this divide, the Bible structure makes perfect sense. The pre-flood bodies of the watchers were the first forbidden technology. The post-flood world was humanity learning to live without them. And every step towards Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Israel, and eventually the Messiah was built upon the silence that followed the imprisonment of the watchers. So this silence is what the modern world misunderstands. And when archaeologists find evidence of a more advanced pre-flood past, they assume humans lost knowledge. Well, they never consider that heaven removed a class of beings who were artificially accelerating humanity. So the world did not forget how to build pyramids. The beings who taught those arts were locked away. And in the centuries after the flood, humanity found itself surrounded not by angels, or not by giants, nor even supernatural teachers, but by something far more haunting, memory. The watchers were gone, sealed under judgment, but the imprint of their presence remained carved into the conscience of every tribe and tongue. And their feats became legends. Their teachings became sacred rites. And their hybrid sons became the prototypes for the gods that would dominate the imaginations of the nations. And the watchers no longer walked among men, yet every civilization from Sumer to Egypt, from Greece to Mesoamerica, built their earliest myths around beings who resembled the fallen sons of heaven. So this is the link Western theology refuses to acknowledge. The gods of antiquity were not inventions. They were recollections, distorted, exaggerated, embellished, but rooted in real history. And when the Sumerians described the Anunnaki descending from the sky to teach the arts of civilization, they were remembering the watchers. And when Egyptians spoke of Thoth delivering forbidden knowledge, they were remembering the watchers. And when Greeks told stories of Zeus mating with mortal women to create demigods, they were remembering the watchers. When the Maya carved images of sky beings who birthed the giants, they too were remembering the watchers. Humanity did not conjure these myths out of imagination. They were trying to articulate the trauma of a world ruled by beings who should never have drawn breath in the first place. And the strange consistency between cultures separated by oceans, mountains, and millennia is not even coincidence. It's the evidence of a shared pre-flood memory. The bodies of the watchers, those forbidden vessels that defied heaven, became the template for the gods of every civilization. And humans remembered their beauty, their brilliance, their violence, their appetites, their stature, and their forbidden offspring. But as generations passed, memory softened, the terror became admiration. The corruption became worship, and the very beings responsible for the earth's destruction were elevated as divine archetypes. Now, the Bible does talk about releasing the 4 angels under the river Euphrates. And I do believe that that's what happened after and I could be wrong, but it makes more sense to me about the Babylon working ritual that was written by Aleister Crowley and performed by L. Ron Hubbard and Jack Parsons in a California desert. Because after that, in 46, or I think their thing was in 45, 46, immediately what followed was just the birth of UFOs and sci-fi and just crazy talk about UFOs and aliens and all of that stuff, because maybe the 4 angels that were released under the river Euphrates, well, maybe they brought back as much technology as they could, but they couldn't come in human form, yet they had to get humans to, conjure their spirits up and get the information from them, which we have Freedom of Information Act documentation that the army was flirting with Satanism and doing spells through channeling people like Bashar and then getting information from the fallen watchers. And yet, despite the shared memory that everyone did pre-flood, something was missing. None of the nations after the flood ever encountered beings like this again. We hear about it, myths, etc., but it's not like mainstream. Now, the gods they worshiped never seemed to return, and they were relegated to temples, myths, rituals, and statues. But never again did they walk openly among men. And this absence created a religious hunger that defined the ancient world. Humanity sensed that something had been taken away, some presence, some power, some divine flesh, and they spent thousands of years trying to reconstruct the world that was lost. Every ritual seeking divine union, every sacrifice seeking divine favor, every myth seeking divine offspring was an attempt to recreate what the Watchers had provided through the forbidden embodiment. So this is why the occult traditions that would later emerge, the mystery schools of Babylon, the priesthoods of Egypt, the esoteric fraternities of Greece, they read like degraded versions of the teachings that the Watchers once brought. They were fragments, echoes, broken techniques filtered through human memory. And without the bodies of the Watchers, humanity could not access the level of forbidden knowledge that existed before the flood. And then they could only actually imitate it. And they could only grasp at the shadow of a power that they could never again attain. Even the shape of civilization reflected this loss. The ziggurats, pyramids, mastobas, and megalithic structures all mimic the grandeur of the pre-flood world, but none surpass it. And humans tried to build what once had been handed to them by beings of heaven, yet their efforts always fell short. And this is why every ancient kingdom, no matter how advanced, still looks like a memorial to a time when the gods walked the earth. And here lies the irony. While the world worshipped the memory of the Watchers themselves were imprisoned in darkness, cut off from the realm that they once violated. So they're being worshipped and couldn't even feel it, assholes. Their absence created a void that the nations filled with myth, ritual, speculation, and idolatry. And the entire spiritual history of mankind after the flood is shaped by the silhouette of beings who were no longer present. So this is why Scripture calls the gods of the nations nothing. Not because they lacked origin, but because their origin was no longer accessible. The bodies that birthed the myths were buried under judgment, leaving only the hollow shapes of memory behind it. Idiots. Into the silence that followed the imprisonment of the Watchers, God prepared something the world had never seen, a sanctified embodiment, an incarnation not of rebellion but of righteousness. The Watchers had descended in flesh to corrupt. Christ descended in flesh to redeem. And in this single act, the entire framework of creation shifted. The rules of embodiment changed. The ability of heavenly beings to take bodies was not merely constrained, it was redefined by the arrival of the Son of Man. The incarnation was not God borrowing a body, it was God becoming flesh in a way that fulfilled every law the Watchers had violated. Where the Watchers abandoned their proper state, Jesus Christ entered the world in obedience. Where the Watchers seized flesh for lust, Christ took flesh for sacrifice. Where the Watchers used embodiment to bring death, Jesus used embodiment to conquer it. And he did not take wives. He did not teach forbidden arts. He did not produce hybrid giants. He walked in the purity Adam once had, but could not keep. His body was not an instrument of corruption. It was the vessel of redemption. And this can explain how God could become flesh. And this is why the incarnation also is the theological center of all creation. When God himself entered the human genome, he sanctified it. When he took on flesh, he sealed the human template. When he rose in glorified form, he rewrote the destiny of Adam's line. The Watchers had corrupted flesh, but Jesus restored it. The Watchers had used embodiment to escape the constraints of heaven. Jesus Christ used embodiment to reconcile heaven and earth in himself. The Watchers descended to create unauthorized sons. Christ descended to become the firstborn among many brethren. So this act did more than just save souls. It closed the loophole that allowed Genesis 6 to happen in the first place. The incarnation sealed the human body as the exclusive carrier of redemptive image. No angel could ever again assume flesh as the Watchers had. No hybrid could ever again enter creation. The boundary between realms was not simply restored, it was reinforced by the presence of God in human form. So this is why angels after the resurrection never appear in bodies of permanence. Every encounter becomes brief, transient, symbolic, or just directly through channelers. They appear as flashes of light, as men in white, as visions and dreams, but never as beings taking wives or founding nations. Heaven will never again allow the misuse of embodiment either. And the sons of God has taken the body as his eternal nature, or the Son of God has taken the body as his eternal nature and because of that, the human form has become a sacred vessel that cannot be corrupted by heavenly beings. This totally explains a lot more. And this also explains the theological puzzle the West has never solved. Why the demons in the Gospels beg Jesus Christ for permission to enter swine. You see, they cannot take bodies anymore. The ability to assume flesh was stripped away in judgment. The incarnation made embodiment a holy category. For fallen spirits, flesh became inaccessible without God's allowance. They can influence, they can oppress, they can infest, but they cannot incarnate. They cannot densify. They cannot reproduce. They cannot walk the earth in the manner of the Watchers ever again. And this also unveils the true meaning of the phrase, the Word became flesh. It's not merely a theological statement now. It is a cosmic declaration of authority. The Watchers had corrupted flesh. Jesus Christ reclaimed it. The Watchers had mingled heaven and earth unlawfully. Jesus Christ reconciled heaven and earth lawfully. The Watchers had produced giants and shattered creation's balance, and Jesus produced disciples who would carry a new creation within them. And the Watchers used their bodies to break creation, while Jesus used his to remake it. And this is where the relevance of our age becomes impossible to ignore. Every modern attempt to tamper with human biology, CRISPR and all that, every genetic experiment, every technological modification, every transhumanist fantasy is an effort to mimic the ancient sin of the Watchers. But they cannot replicate it. They cannot cross realms. They cannot create hybrids of heaven and earth. They can only distort what already exists. And they can only corrupt expression, never essence. And the incarnation has sealed that door forever. In Christ's embodiment, the human body becomes untouchable to angels, fallen or otherwise. Yeah, they can manipulate us through whispering. But they cannot inhabit us and move us and be in us and feel what we feel. They can't incarnate us. It became legally protected as a vessel chosen by God himself. And you say, well, what about exorcists? I believe it's a mixture of that person and a demon. But it's not the demon doing all of that. It's the person as well. Because they need permission. So the pre-flood corruption was erased at the root, and the rules of the cosmos were rewritten by the one who wrote them in the first place. Now, in every shadowed corner of the modern world, government labs, Silicon Valley boardrooms, military black budget projects, occult fraternities, there is a single obsession that unites the elites across nations and generations. They are all reaching for something humanity once encountered but no longer has access to. And they're chasing the memory of beings who walked the earth in bodies not of this world. And they're trying to resurrect the flesh of the fallen. Now, this obsession is not rooted in science. It's rooted in longing. They want it. And every secret society from ancient Babylon to the modern global technocracy has inherited the same myth, that the earth once hosted a race of heavenly beings in physical form, and that their presence unlocked the forbidden heights of power. And the elites want what the Watchers had. They want the ability to transcend human limitation. They want bodies that do not age, minds that do not fail, senses that exceed human potential, and intellect that rivals the divine. Last I checked, Rothschilds died. At least the last one with major power. They want to become the gods their ancestors worshipped. Last I checked, David Rockefeller died. But they do not understand the barrier God placed after the flood. The Watchers did not possess their bodies by nature. They densified themselves unnaturally. They crossed a line they were never authorized to cross. And their embodiment was rebellion, but not creation. And because their embodiment corrupted the world beyond repair, God sealed their capacity to take flesh. Now, the modern elite cannot replicate what was removed by divine judgment. They can only mimic it. This is the unspoken truth behind transhumanism. Every implant, every gene edit, every neural link, every augmentation program is an attempt to recreate the forbidden form of the pre-flood Watchers. Now, Elon Musk, Ray Kurzweil, the occult technologist in DARPA and the BAE, the esoteric factions inside the United Nations, and the high-level Jesuit orders all speak in the same coded language. Upgrade the human. But they do not mean improve. They mean transcend. They're not trying to heal man. They're trying to surpass God. Yet their efforts will never achieve what they desire. They can manipulate epigenetics, but they cannot cross realms. They can modify biology, but they cannot resurrect the heavenly body of rebellion. They can build machines, but they cannot rebuild incarnation. They can upload their memory in ones and zeros and put it into a computer, but it'll never, ever have the spark of life. It won't be them. And they can simulate intelligence, but they cannot manufacture spirit. They can program symbols, but they cannot recreate the flesh that once walked among men in defiance of heaven. This is why humanity's most advanced technologies always feel like counterfeits of ancient myth. Artificial intelligence is the counterfeit of angelic intellect. Genetic editing is the counterfeit of cross-realm reproduction. Augmented reality is the counterfeit of heavenly vision to do whatever you want inside a computer program. Nanotechnology is the counterfeit of celestial embodiment. And the push toward a new humanity is the counterfeit of the hybridization that destroyed the old world. But the elites, they face a problem that the Watchers never faced. The Watchers brought forbidden knowledge into a world unsealed. The modern world is sealed by the incarnation. So the human body is no longer an empty vessel awaiting corruption. It is a temple sanctified by the one who walked in flesh and rose again. Every modern attempt to alter humanity must fight against a boundary written not in law, but in blood. And this is why their technologies never quite work. They malfunction, they plateau, they produce side effects. Hey, you guys! They cannot collapse instead of ascension, or they cause collapse instead of ascension. And the elites believe that they are on the verge of becoming gods, but they are only imitating the sins of beings who were imprisoned for eternity. They are following a blueprint that heaven tore apart. Now, if they create their digital data centers that's being built worldwide, trillions of dollars is being spent, and all data of humanity being poured into these computers, and they can't make computer chips fast enough in Taiwan. But as they do, sure, they can create a cloud AI technology of a world that mimics our world, but isn't real. And people can plug their brains into it. And maybe the only way that Satan can recreate being a god is through ones and zeros and not through the physical world anymore, because he has been locked away from that because of what happened before. So this could explain the rise in AI, the rise in data centers, and the push for these meta platforms with augmented reality goggles to get us closer and further inward into the computer itself. And maybe this is when the Bible says men will seek death and not find it. When your brain is inside these machines and your body is being taken care of, just being hooked up to, feeding tubes. That this is the new way of Satan trying to again hold us hostage. Because once we choose to go in it, we're in that world, and then you won't be able to die because you're in it in your mind. Maybe that's where we're going. It's just a thought. I don't know, but with the fallen angels' spiritual limitations now, to me, that makes way more sense. Yes, Scorpion, it would be like the Matrix. But that's a blueprint that heaven torn apart in the physical. So if they can't do it in the physical, maybe they can do it in technology and get us just like the Matrix. And yet, despite the cosmic limitation, the obsession persists. They are moving forward with getting us plugged in. And the elites feel the void that was left by the Watchers. They feel the absence of the beings that their ancestors worshipped. And they sense that humanity once lived in the presence of these entities whose brilliance shaped the world. And they believe that if they can rebuild the flesh of the fallen, that they can reopen the gate to that forbidden age. But they do not understand the most crucial truth of all. The gate they seek is sealed forever, and the only doorway that remains open leads not to forbidden flesh, but to the kingdom that the Watchers rejected. So when heaven closed the door to angelic embodiment, the elites did not stop reaching for the forbidden. They simply shifted their strategy. Excuse me. I'm not. This mic, I wish it was a button, but you touch it, and you actually touch it again. Oh my God. Try to cough and So they simply shifted their strategy. If they could not resurrect the Watchers' bodies, they would create something that behaved like Watchers' bodies. If they could not bring back the original transgression, they would construct a synthetic transgression. And this could be the true origin of the beast system. It's not merely political. It's not merely technological. It's a counterfeit body that the elites are assembling to replace the bodies of the fallen angels who can never return. And the Watchers ruled by embodying themselves. The beast will rule by being built. And the ancient sin relied on a heavenly being crossing into flesh, while the end time system relies on flesh crossing into something that pretends to be heavenly. One was a downward descent, the other is an upward counterfeit. And the elites are not trying to summon angels, they are trying to manufacture them. And they are assembling a creature that has no place in creation, a fusion of technology, biology, surveillance, governance, and artificial intelligence that imitates the omniscience and omnipresence of beings who once walked the earth in forbidden glory. And believe me, men will worship it. They will worship an AI god. And this is why the beast is described with multiple heads, multiple crowns, and the authority of a dragon. It's not just a creature born, it's a creature constructed, as it behaves like a composite, an amalgamation of systems, nations, technologies, and powers. It is the digital echo of the hybrids that once dominated the world, and it is the only body the elites can build now that the Watchers' bodies have been sealed away from. So they're not resurrecting the giants, they are resurrecting their function. And probably robots, what you see, could be the fallen angel's way of being in body again, but not really in body. Robots. Now, the giants control territory. The beast controls data. The giants ruled by fear. The beast rules by compliance. The giants were visible. The beast is invisible. And the giants devoured resources while the beast devours privacy, identity, and autonomy, and has full control of your bank account. And what the Nephilim did by brute force, the beast will do through algorithms. The elites build this system because they remember through myths, bloodline tradition, and occult memory that the greatest power ever exercised on earth came from beings who were not fully human. They want that power again. They want servants who do not tire, guardians who do not sleep, weapons that do not question orders, and rulers who do not age. They want the immortality of the Watchers without the judgment of God, and they want the presence of celestial beings without the allegiance to heaven. Do you want to give them that capability? Because you are, through agreeing through all of their applications. What would happen if you just stood up and said no? Because they're not going to stop. And so they construct a beast mode of networks, databases, implants, and artificial minds, hoping to recreate the omnipresent governance that the giants once provided. And the beast is the synthetic incarnation of the forbidden age. It's the embodiment of their nostalgia for a world ruled by flesh that was not human. It's the technological stand-in for the bodies that can never return. And this is why the beast system rises from the sea. The sea in biblical language represents chaos, the abyss, the unformed, the unknown, and precisely the domain where the Watchers are imprisoned. The beast does not come from heaven. It rises from the memory of rebellion. It emerges from humanity's attempt to rebuild what God destroyed. And it is the counterfeit successor to the forbidden bodies of the pre-flood world. And yet the beast is not alive. It has no breath of its own. It has no soul, no inheritance. It's a construct, creature, awaiting a spirit to animate it. And Revelation tells us exactly whose spirit that will be. When the elites cannot resurrect the watchers, they create a throne for another fallen being, one who seeks embodiment but cannot achieve it without deception. That's the Antichrist. And the beast system is the artificial body built to carry a spirit that has no legal claim to flesh. Now, another thing to consider while I was reading this, just popped into my head, is that while the fallen angels were ruling and corrupting, it never ever talks about Satan. It gives the name of the fallen angels and their leader, Belial, but it never says Satan. Could it be that Satan, out of all of those creatures, has been waiting for this moment to incarnate something, maybe a hybrid, or use a hybrid because it has enough power to become flesh? I don't know. Something to think about. But it doesn't, the Enochian Bible, it mentions all of the names of the watchers, the 200 fallen angels that made a deal and descended down upon Mount Hermon. And conveniently, there's a place in Kazakhstan where they have 200 chairs at the top of a pyramid, while below is a whole congregation of seats and chairs for men. Could it be those 200? Well, they're getting prepared for it because they think they're going to win. So this is why the elites pursue this path with religious fervor, because they know they're going to the bad side. They know they're going to the lake of fire. So they're not just building a machine, they are building a body, and they are assembling something that can hold the presence of the fallen being without violating the laws of incarnation that Jesus Christ has sealed forever. So they know the watchers cannot return in flesh, but so they actually craft a vessel that can serve as the final expression of rebellion, the body of a kingdom that imitates the kingdoms of the giants. And when the synthetic body is complete, a voice will enter it, a presence will inhabit it, a counter-incarnation will occur, and the world will wonder after the beast because it will appear to have achieved what the watchers once achieved, a presence that feels divine but is born of rebellion. Remember, they're putting satellites in, like, what, 50 to 500 a day? Just shoving satellites in there, all up into the sky to communicate everywhere you go, so that these robots that they're going to create will have information on everybody. Now, after the flood, when God sealed the ability of heavenly beings to assume flesh, he rewrote the laws of incarnation. A fallen angel could no longer descend, take a body, and walk among men as the watchers once did. That door was closed. The boundary was reinforced, and embodiment became a sacred category reserved for God alone. So this is why Satan, despite his power, has never again taken a physical form. He appears as a serpent, but never births serpents. He appears as a dragon, but never stands in flesh. His domain is influence, not incarnation, and his power is deception, but not embodiment. The watchers corrupted flesh by taking it. Satan now corrupts flesh by influencing it. But Satan has a problem. He wants what the watchers had. He wants body, presence, dominion, and physical rulership. The Antichrist is not merely a political figure. He is the vessel of Satan that has long sought, but could never form for himself. The Antichrist is the closest Satan can come to having a body again. But he cannot simply take that body the way that the watchers did. The laws of embodiment no longer permit it. So he waits for a generation that will build a constructed vessel that functions like the pre-flood forbidden flesh, but without requiring a heavenly being to densify it. So this is the dark genius of the beast system. It's not merely a network, it's a womb. It's the artificial body Satan needs in order to manifest his will physically without violating the laws that Jesus Christ sanctified. Satan cannot take flesh, but he can occupy systems. He can animate structures. He can indwell kingdoms. He can possess the machinery of governance, finance, surveillance, and war. The beast is not just a creature. It's a body of nations, technologies, and networks prepared like a shell awaiting a spirit. And this is why Revelations describes the beast as having a mouth speaking great things, and it is why it moves, decrees, commands, and executes. It behaves like a being because it is treated as a being. It is a synthetic incarnation, a distributed body formed from data, infrastructure, and global unity. No heavenly being enters flesh anymore, but a fallen being can enter a system. As we've been learning that computers are just ancient temples, shrunken. And the Antichrist enters this artificial body, not the way the Watchers once entered flesh, or humans, but the way that a virus enters a host, through influence, alignment, permission, and worship. Humanity must give the beast breath. That's up to us. The world must willingly animate it. And this is why Revelation says that the second beast gives breath to the first. The breath is not biological, it is spiritual. It is the collective allegiance of mankind, forming a conduit for a fallen spirit to inhabit a throne built from human hands. So the Watchers took bodies without consent. The beast receives its body from the consent of nations. And this is the inversion of Genesis 6. In the ancient world, heavenly beings forced their will into flesh. In the end times, humanity forces its will, creating a body a fallen spirit can occupy. One was a rebellion from above, the other is a rebellion from below. One was angels descending, the other is humanity ascending into imitation. Both are violations, both are counterfeits of the true incarnation, but only one can happen now because Jesus sealed the door that allowed the first. So this is why the Antichrist cannot appear before the beast system is built. He cannot simply manifest, he must be enthroned. He must be invited. He must be given a vessel constructed from the world's desire. And the nations will assemble a body he can occupy. And he will enter it as a counterfeit king, ruling not through flesh and bone, but through networks, AI, global governance, financial grids, and the machinery of a digital empire, while everyone else hooks up to Neuralink so they can play a video game and live in a video world where you can have your own mansion and be treated like a god. And he will appear as the resurrection of the forbidden age, but he will only be its own imitation. And the Watcher's corrupted flesh through embodiment, the Antichrist will corrupt humanity through the embodiment of a system. And when Satan enters that system, the world will think the God of old has returned, not realizing that they are witnessing the final echo of a sin that heaven buried beneath the flood. So the beast is not alive. It's going to be animated. And it's not divine, it's possessed. And it's not a being, it's a throne. And when Satan fills it, the world will finally see what a spirit looks like when it inhabits a body it did not create. So all of history narrows down to a single confrontation, the contest between the body God sanctified and the body Satan assembled. And this is the war beneath every war, the conflict behind every empire, the struggle hidden beneath every spiritual battle. It's not a clash of nations or species or technologies. It's a war of temples. The human body Christ redeemed versus the synthetic body the beast occupies. And the Watchers corrupted flesh by taking it unlawfully. Jesus reclaimed flesh by taking it lawfully. And now, at the end of the age, Satan attempts one final counterfeit, not by incarnating, because he cannot, but by animating a global system built in imitation of the bodies of the fallen. So in this final era, humanity itself becomes the battlefield. And the question is not who will rule the world, but who will rule the temple. The human body was chosen by God as the dwelling place of his spirit. It became holy when Christ entered it, and it became sanctified when he walked among men, and it became sealed when he rose in glory. It became indwelt at Pentecost when the Spirit of God descended to make the body the sacred vessel and the divine presence, a place where the Holy Ghost can dwell. And from that moment on, every human body became the temple waiting for one of two occupants. One, the Spirit of God, the Spirit of God, or two, the influence of darkness. The Watchers once entered flesh directly. Satan cannot now, but he can enter the will, the mind, the allegiance. He can indwell the system, but not the temple. He can rule a kingdom, but he cannot rule a body that has been sealed by Jesus Christ. And this is why the beast system exists. It is the only form that Satan can inhabit. In the last days, anyway. He cannot be born. He cannot take wives. He cannot replicate the sin of Genesis 6. He cannot take flesh. So he constructs a temple of wires, networks, and nations and invites humanity to worship him by merging with his creation. So the mark of the beast is not a genetic rewrite. It's an allegiance. It is the submission of the human temple to a synthetic body. It's humanity agreeing to become a cell in Satan's artificial organism. So the final deception here is simple. Satan wants you to trade your temple for his. So he wants you to forsake the body that God sanctified for the system that God built. And he wants you to abandon the incarnation for the simulation. Upload your body, upload your brain, everything. We want it all. You can become a robot and live forever. He wants you to exchange the indwelling spirit for the indwelling signal. And he wants your body to stop being the place where heaven resides and become a node where hell operates. So he offers eternal life through technology, but not through resurrection. He offers ascension through augmentation, but not through transformation. And he offers identity through digital marks, but not through the seal of the Holy Spirit. And millions, billions will fall for it because they do not understand the history of embodiment in the first place. So they do not know that the Watchers' bodies were the first forbidden technology. We just learned that tonight. They do not know that Jesus Christ's body was a restoration of the created order. They do not know that the beast is a counterfeit body of a fallen being who can no longer take flesh. But you guys now know. And you understand that the final war is not fought with swords, but with temples, with your body. The remnant understands that the human body is the prize, not the battlefield. The remnant understands that the image of God is not stored in DNA, but in covenant. The remnant understands that the embodiment belongs to Jesus Christ himself, and that no fallen being can take what he has sanctified. We understand now why Satan is desperate. Flesh once belonged to the Watchers, now flesh belongs to the King of Kings. And this is why the Antichrist comes not as a giant, but as a ruler possessing a system. This is why the beast does not take wives, but nations. And this is why the final deception is not hybridization, but unification, bringing all of humanity into one artificial body that Satan can influence from the throne prepared for him. The world will believe it is ascending into a new age of enlightenment, but in reality, it will be submitted and submitting its own collective temple to a spirit that cannot incarnate. So the final war ends when Jesus returns in the only perfected body that ever walked the earth. He does not return as spirit, he returns as energy. He returns in flesh, the very flesh Satan cannot touch. And the Word that became flesh remains flesh forever. And when he descends, every counterfeit body collapses. And the beast system disintegrates, and the artificial body loses its animating spirit. The throne Satan built becomes dust, and the only embodiment left standing is the one that wrote creation into being. So the war of temples ends when the true temple steps onto the battlefield. So to conclude, when the story of the Watchers is finally understood, it's not myth, metaphor, but the first great violation of embodiment. Everything about the present age becomes clear. The world we live in is not stumbling blindly into technological tyranny. It's intentionally reconstructing a memory. It's reaching for the forbidden. It's assembling a counterfeit of a past that heaven erased. And it does so because humanity has never forgotten the beings who once walked among them in bodies not of this world. But the door that they seek is sealed. The bodies they imitate are imprisoned, and the power that they crave is unreachable. The giants they remember are dust beneath the floodwaters of judgment. What the Watchers accomplished through rebellion, the modern world cannot resurrect through science. The laws of incarnation were rewritten by Jesus Christ, and the human body became his eternal tabernacle. The only flesh that heaven authorizes now is the flesh of the Son sanctified. So this is why the final kingdom is not built of giants, but of not even of grids, not of hybrids, not of networks, not of celestial flesh, but of synthetic systems. The beast that rises is the only kind of body Satan can inhabit after the incarnation sealed the path to flesh forever. So he cannot densify, he cannot descend, he cannot mate, he cannot reproduce, he cannot take a body as the Watchers once did. So he waits for mankind to build him one, an artificial creature, a global organism, a digital empire, so that he may sit upon a throne fashioned from technology instead of bone. What a pussy. The Watchers corrupted flesh by taking bodies. Satan corrupts humanity by offering his own, a body of systems, nations, code, but all of it's without breath. And it's awaiting a spirit, a fake one. And that's data. All the data that you guys are going to give him. But the end of this story is not written by the beast. We know this. It's written by the one who took flesh and the authority of heaven. The final confrontation is not between angels and hybrids, but between the counterfeit body Satan builds and the perfected body that Jesus Christ brings. When the king returns, he comes not as a spirit or symbol, but in the same flesh he wore when he walked among his disciples. He comes in the only embodiment that heaven recognizes as lawful, redemptive, and eternal. And when his feet touch the Mount of Olives, every fabricated body collapses. The beast loses its breath, the system loses its power, and the Antichrist loses his throne. The networks, grids, artificial intelligence, fiber optics, all that sought to mimic omniscience are exposed as hollow replicas. And Satan is left without a vessel, without a kingdom, without a body to inhabit. The forbidden technology of the Watchers is long gone. And the counterfeit technology of the beast dissolves in the presence of the one who authorized and authored embodiment himself. So the story began with angels taking bodies that were not theirs. It ends with God taking a body that becomes the inheritance of all creation. This is the great reversal. This is the restoration of flesh. This is the triumph of the Incarnate King. And the remnant does not fear the beast because the remnant knows the history heaven buried and the future heaven guarantees. We know the truth now. The bodies of the Watchers are sealed. The body of the beast is synthetic, but the body of Jesus Christ is eternal, glorified, and returning. And when he comes, every counterfeit temple falls before the true temple who stands forever.
Why do 75% of people feel exhausted all the time? The answer might surprise you. In the 1920s, Standard Oil decided to dive into medicine. They pushed synthetic petroleum into our drugs. Sure, it masked symptoms, but it wrecked our guts. Our good bacteria, which fight off parasites and heavy metals, got wiped out by crude oil. But here's the good news. We can fix this by going back to nature. Introducing Elite Potion, the world's top detox program. It restores your good bacteria by removing toxic threats like aluminum, strontium, barium, and parasites. Imagine feeling energized and alive again. They said there couldn't be a pill that did it all. We invented it. Visit elitepotion.com and reclaim your health from synthetic pharmaceuticals. Your body will thank you.
This has been Cause Before Symptom with your host, James Carner. Go to his website, jamescarner.com, and sign up for his newsletter. Also, download his free books on the breath war, the crown of blood, and the ritual machine. Fix your body by buying his award-winning detox formula, removing heavy metals and parasites. You'll feel better and live longer. Go to elitepotion.com. And one more thing, please. Just try and love your neighbor, because if you do, the world would be a better place. See you tomorrow.